One was Hollywood's golden boy, the other, drag royalty with a voice that lit up a generation. Different times, different battles, but both dared to live their truth. When in this video, we reveal the lives behind the legends. Richard Chamberlain, The Vivienne. You've seen the spotlight. Now, step into their stories. Richard Chamberlain, a journey of grace, silence, and truth. Born on March 31, 1934, in the polished hills of Beverly Hills, California, just a stone's throw from the beating heart of Hollywood, George Richard Chamberlain seemed destined for a life touched by the silver screen. But the glamour that surrounded his birthplace didn't reach into the walls of his home. Behind closed doors, Richard grew up in a household marked by emotional distance and quiet expectation. There was little warmth, even less understanding. In that silence, he learned the power of introspection. The boy who would one day mesmerize audiences learned early on to listen, to observe, to feel deeply in ways that couldn't always be expressed. At Pomona College, he found a spark. It wasn't the applause of the stage that drew him in, it was the magic of transformation, the sacred act of telling the truth through another's skin. Acting for Richard wasn't escape, it was revelation. After graduating, duty called, and he served honorably in the U.S. Army during the Korean War. It was there, amid discipline and structure, that Richard honed his resilience. But there was always something quietly different about him. A truth buried deep, tender, unspoken, carried like a secret weight. In a time when being different meant being invisible, Richard learned to move through life with careful grace. But that inner light, the stillness, the thoughtfulness, the quiet elegance, was already unmistakable. He was preparing not just for fame, but for something far more enduring, a life of depth and quiet courage. Then in 1961, the Dream Factory finally came calling. Richard was cast as the compassionate, steady-handed Dr. James Kildare, a role that would not only define a generation but reshape how masculinity was portrayed on television. With his calm voice and deep, soulful gaze, Richard brought something entirely new to the screen. He wasn't just a doctor. He was a healer, a symbol of hope in living rooms across America. Dr. Kildare became a cultural phenomenon. Richard was everywhere, on magazine covers, talk shows, red carpets. But while the world fell in love with the persona, the man behind the charm remained guarded. In a time when a whisper could destroy a career, he guarded his truth like a fragile heirloom. He wasn't hiding out of shame, he was surviving. The fame was enormous, but the cost was heavy. To be adored and yet not truly known, that was the paradox Richard lived. Every interview was a dance, every smile a carefully chosen mask. But he didn't let that define him. When the series ended, he didn't chase the spotlight. He stepped away from it, with intention, with purpose. He chose the harder road, reinvention. Richard left behind the comforts of stardom and went to England to pursue something deeper, the craft. In the theaters of London, he studied Shakespeare, Molière, Chekhov, not for accolades, but for the art itself. He peeled back the layers of fame to rediscover the raw roots of performance. And in doing so, he found himself again, not as a heartthrob, but as a true actor. His return to American screens in the late 1970s was not a comeback, it was a rebirth. With miniseries like Shogun, The Thornbirds, and The Bourne Identity, he shattered every box Hollywood had put him in. He portrayed complex men, torn, passionate, and deeply human. Roles that whispered truths he could not yet speak. Through them, Richard reached out to those who had lived their lives in silence, telling them, "You are not alone." Audiences called him the king of the miniseries, but his real reign was in our hearts. He showed us that power could be quiet, that masculinity could be gentle, and that truth could be told even without words. His characters became vessels, holding space for emotions many were still too afraid to name. With every role, he chipped away at the walls until there was nowhere left to hide. Then, in 2003, at the age of 69, Richard Chamberlain did something braver than any performance. He came out, publicly, gracefully, and unapologetically. In his memoir Shattered Love, he opened a door that had remained closed for nearly 7 decades. But it wasn't a confession. It was a celebration of self, of love, of the freedom to finally speak in his own voice. He honored his long-term partner, Martin Rabbit, with tenderness and truth. Their life together, built quietly and away from the noise, was a testament to enduring love in a world that hadn't always welcomed it. In Hawaii, surrounded by nature and simplicity, Richard found what he had been searching for all along. Not fame, not applause, but peace. And in 2025, just days before what would have been his 91st birthday, the world paused. Not just to mourn, but to remember. To honor a life lived with elegance, restraint, and finally, radiant honesty. Richard Chamberlain didn't just play roles, he lived them. He gave us permission to look closer, to find strength in stillness and truth in silence. His story reminds us that legacy is not carved in headlines, but in the quiet choices we make, the truths we dare to tell, and the lives we touch without ever knowing. We do not simply remember an actor. We remember a man, gentle, resolute, and finally, gloriously free. The Vivienne, a life in full color, a legacy in full light. Born on April 12, 1992, in the peaceful seaside town of Colwyn Bay, Wales, James Lee Williams came into the world quietly, but he wouldn't stay quiet for long. Even as a child, there was something radiant about James, a vibrancy, a playful spark, a creative mind always reaching for more than what his surroundings could offer. In a community where most young boys were expected to follow the same path, James instinctively walked his own, guided by something internal, something beautiful, something fierce. Growing up queer in a small Welsh town was not without pain. There were stares, silence, and moments when the world felt too narrow for someone as expansive as James. But instead of retreating, he turned inward and found strength. He turned discomfort into drive, difference into direction. And in his teens, he found the art form that would not only change his life, but give him the power to change others. That art was drag. What started as curiosity soon became identity. James didn't put on makeup to become someone else. He did it to become more of himself. With every lash and every layer, he was reclaiming joy. Naming herself the Vivienne, she built a persona that was equal parts old Hollywood glam, razor-sharp wit, and grounded British charm. The name was inspired by the elegance of designer Vivienne Westwood, but the Vivienne was no copy. She was original to the core, unapologetically camp, emotionally intelligent, and endlessly captivating. Drag was her escape, but more than that, it was her arrival. In a world that often asks queer people to shrink, the Vivienne expanded. She didn't just do drag, she elevated it. Whether performing in nightclubs or appearing in local competitions, her talent stood out, not only because of her polished aesthetics, but because of the emotional depth behind the sparkle. She could make you laugh and then make you think. She could roast a room and then hug it back together. That rare duality became her signature. Then in 2019, the world took notice. The Vivienne was chosen as one of 10 queens to compete in the inaugural season of RuPaul's Drag Race UK. From the moment she stepped into the workroom, she exuded the confidence of a seasoned star and the hunger of an artist finally stepping onto the platform she deserved. She wasn't there just to slay the runway, though she did, week after week. She was there to set a standard, and she did. With quick wit, immaculate execution, and emotional intelligence, the Vivienne dominated the competition. Not through arrogance, but through consistency and class. She wasn't loud for attention, she was loud with purpose. By the season's end, she was crowned the first ever UK's drag superstar. But the crown wasn't just about victory. It was about validation, that a working-class queen from Wales could become a cultural icon, all while being fully, fiercely herself. Winning Drag Race UK launched the Vivienne into the global spotlight, but fame didn't change her. It only amplified what was already there. She used her platform to speak about mental health, queer visibility, and the complicated journey of self-acceptance. She didn't pretend to be perfect, she was refreshingly real. She talked about anxiety, self-doubt, the pressures of fame. In doing so, she became more than a queen. She became a mirror for others navigating the same path. Her career blossomed across multiple mediums. She starred in sold-out drag tours, appeared on major UK television shows like Dancing on Ice, and collaborated with charities supporting LGBTQ+ youth. Whether lip-syncing with ferocity or sitting down for a vulnerable interview, she always brought authenticity. She understood that drag wasn't just performance, it was protest, healing, and art in motion. But perhaps her most powerful quality was her heart. behind the wigs and wit was someone deeply empathetic. She mentored younger queens, uplifted emerging talent, and never let ego get in the way of empathy. She was known for giving second chances, for remembering her roots, and for making space where there had once been none. Her kindness wasn't performative, it was foundational. Then, in March 2025, just shy of her 33rd birthday, the world was met with shocking news. The Vivienne had passed away. The grief was immediate, and it was global. From drag artists to everyday fans, from London to Los Angeles, the loss was felt deeply, not just because a talent had been taken, but because a light had gone out. But even in absence, the Vivienne's light continues to glow. She changed the cultural landscape, not with noise, but with nuance, not with scandal, but with sincerity. She proved that queer art could be both joyful and profound, funny and transformative. She gave us performances we'll never forget, yes, but more importantly, she gave us permission to be bold, to be kind, to be real. Her life was a masterclass in authenticity. And though her time on Earth was far too brief, her legacy is vast. It lives in every young queer person who dares to dream, in every drag performer who refuses to fit a mold, in every soul who's ever been told they're too much and learned because of her that they're just enough. The Vivienne wasn't just a star. She was a constellation, complex, radiant, impossible to miss. And though she may no longer walk among us, she lives on in every sparkle, every laugh, every moment we choose to live out loud.